everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Nicky. I'm the editor of First News, which is the UK's only newspaper for children, read by about 2.5 million children every week. I'm really thrilled to be moderating the special sports panel at the Global Education and Skills Forum. I know my readers and lovers of football and cricket the world over will be watching the video of this discussion, which will be available on the GESF website soon afterwards. Before I introduce the sporting greats that have kindly joined us here in Dubai, I'd like to add that this is the very first time that the GESF has had a sports panel. But as a theme of this year's forum is global citizenship, we felt that sport had so many lessons to teach us in terms of its ability to unite people around the world. And of course, it holds so many lessons in terms of equipping young people for the skills of the future. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel, as if they need any introduction. I'll start with our cricketers. First of all, we have Lara, a former Trinidad... I feel the love in the room. A former Trinidadian international cricket player who is widely acknowledged as one of the greatest cricketers of all time, if not the greatest. Brian holds several cricketing records, including the record for the highest individual score in first-class cricket, with 501 not out for Warwickshire against Durham at Edgbaston in 1994. Next to Brian, we don't, but over there, we have another cricketing great, Aravinda de Silva. Aravinda. Aravinda is a former Sri Lankan cricketer who is widely considered as the finest batsman produced by the country in his era. He's also regarded as one of the most elegant batsmen of his generation, who helped to win the 1996 Cricket World Cup. To date, Aravinda is the only player to make 100 and take 3 or more wickets in a World Cup final. And now to our footballers. First of all, we have Dwight Yorke, who is a footballer. Sorry, applause. Dwight is a footballer that represented his country, Trinidad and Tobago, 74 times. Dwight holds a record number of participations in different World Cup competitions, including qualifying stages, 6 in total. He's also played for several UK Premier League clubs, such as Aston Villa and Manchester United. And it was during his first season at Man United that he guided the club to a unique treble of the Premiership title, the FA Cup, and UEFA Champions League. Last, certainly not least, we have Jermaine Jenas. Jermaine. Jermaine also played for several Premier League clubs, including Newcastle United and Tottenham Hotspur, and he also earned 21 caps for England. Jermaine has earned himself a reputation as a very articulate speaker, appearing on BBC's Question Time. Football fans are now likely to see him as a pundit regularly on Match of the Day. So thank you, all of you, for being with us today to share your views on the sport and how it fits into the education debates. I'll ask some questions now, and hopefully at the end we'll have time to throw a few questions out to you guys too. But first of all, if we may, let's get straight onto the subject of education. Perhaps Brian, and then I can ask Jermaine, what kind of impact did choosing to be an elite sportsman have on your education? And do you have any regrets that pursuing sport made you miss out on any other opportunities?
Well, I believe that, first of all, is it morning? Good afternoon, everyone. I just landed from a flight from the Maldives, so you know what kind of mood I'm in. But yes, I think talking about sport and education, I believe that it's very important. When I look back at my life as a college student, I found myself that I was around maybe about four sort of category students. The guy who was academically inclined and thought about nothing else. The student that liked sport, and felt that education was just a transportation from A to B into his sporting career. I felt in the category of the guy who loved sport, dreamt about playing for the West Indies, but felt that and was told by my parents and teachers that education was very, very important. So I sort of pursued both, not at the same level, but of course to play cricket on any given day, I had to pass my geography or my English or my French or whatever the case may be. And then you had the fourth category, a guy who was sort of academically inclined, but also liked playing recreational sport. So I felt that it was important for me as an integral part of any young person upbringing that they do include sport as a recreation if you're academically inclined, or academics if you're sportsman related minded. And I felt that that worked pretty well. I didn't feel that I was disadvantaged at any point in time. I knew from my teachers and my parents that I had to do something beyond my short-lived cricket career. And I was quite happy to sort of work at my academic side. I felt that the advantages of doing that was I challenged myself in an area where I was not very good at. I was maybe in cruise control playing cricket or playing football or table tennis, but when I got into that four walls of a classroom, I struggled a bit. But whenever I conquered, whatever I achieved in the classroom, I felt that I achieved more and I felt more satisfied than actually being on the sporting field. So for me, the marrying of sport and education is very, very important.
Okay. And Dwight?
I think just to add to what Brian has pretty much said, I came into the category, Brian mentioned the 4 categories. I came into just sports only. I was not really into the schoolwork. I was obsessed with sports, all types of sports, from running, the athletics to cricket to football to table tennis, all the sports that I possibly could have played. And I've struggled in classrooms, I've struggled in my schooling time. I find it very difficult to concentrate over those period of time or for the length of time in a classroom. But nevertheless, over the years, what I've done, and I look back now, not everyone take the path of education. I was very fortunate to, at the age of 16, was integrated into the sports at a professional level. So I had to learn very quickly. I had to learn some of the fundamentals, the discipline, the dedication to the sport, all those things, the timekeeping. That was a different type of skills that wasn't pretty much in classrooms. So I was very lucky that I had to adapt very quickly, and that was something that was important for me as a person going forward. And now that I can look back, that I've learned a lot dealing with the media, dealing with the people from different sort of background, and having that educational that I didn't have at the very beginning.
Okay, cool. And so widening this out to Jermaine and Aravinda, is there any advice you would give to young people that dream of becoming professional sports people in terms of their education?
Shall I go? Dwight makes a very good point in terms of wanting to be an elite athlete and also pursue a career in education, especially as a footballer. You're thrust into the top level of sport at a very young age. Dwight mentioned 16 years old. It was similar for myself, where my friends were still at school, at college, going on to university, whereas I was all of a sudden getting on the coach to go and play first team football. And if you want to be in that team and in that elite league that we were in, you have to be fully focused on that journey. So at a time, there is a part of you that really struggles to do both. I was fortunate in terms of the fact that my mother was heavy in terms of me getting an education, and also along the lines of, look, you might not become a footballer, so you need to have a plan B. And she wanted me to be a physio, so it was getting into the triple sciences, which were tough. And I took that all the way as far as I could, but the minute that decision came to become a footballer or go down the education route, my dream was always to be a professional footballer. And I think all those things that Dwight spoke about there, which it's a separate type of education that you learn along the way, dealing with the media, dealing with people that are higher up than you, and how to approach them. And I think that is one of the big things that football and probably cricket gives you as well. It gives you that confidence in life to be able to handle any situation that you're put into.
Okay, Aravinda?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I think as a child, my father encouraged me a lot in whatever I did. And my passion was always sport, and I played all kinds of sport: tennis, cricket, soccer, billiards, everything. Um, and I remember him telling me one day when I had to make a decision at GCSE level whether I had to continue with my studies after my O-levels or whether to continue cricket. And he called me to a side and said, I am happy for you to continue with whatever you enjoy doing. And my passion was always cricket. And he said, why don't you go ahead and play your cricket and don't worry about education? Well, I think my mother was exactly the opposite. She just wanted me to continue my studies and forget about cricket. But at the end of the day, what I realized today is the importance of sport, where I have learned so much over the years. Today I run an organization with over 1,000 people, and how we need to work with people, how you need to adapt to situations, and all that you learn at sport, and you have to make quick decisions. So I guess in a way it's very, very important at a young age to get a kid to do what they really enjoy and try to combine that with education. And if you look at cricket as a sport, you can do mathematical things on the field. If you take runs, wickets, things like that, you can make it interesting. And I think that is a way, I think education also should move in as one area where you try to combine the two and try and make sure that the kids who enjoy doing something and then get them involved in the education in that aspect.
So find their passion and help that to widen their broader education.
Through what the education wants to take.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. People talk a lot about 21st century skills, resilience, soft skills, empathy, and so on. Research suggests that sport has a key role to play in building these skills. If each of you had to pick one or two wider skills that you developed as a result of being an elite sportsman, what would you pick? And did the skills you gained as a professional sports person make you better at other unexpected or expected things that happened in your life?
I think if I had to pick one, it would be empathy, because as a captain of the West Indies cricket team, which I did on 3 occasions, I got sacked twice and they brought me back. But I felt that, as a professional, what I brought to the table, not everybody else did, and it's a different level of skill. And I felt that it was my responsibility to be a part of a team and be a successful member of the team. While in some occasions you had guys who were maybe with a lower self-esteem, felt that being in the background was a little bit better. And for me, I didn't really understand that. And as a captain, you need to. And you find that some of the best captains in Trinidad and Aravinda in the world, Aravinda will tell you, the guy that is actually middle of the table in terms of skill. You have Mike Burley, you have guys like even presently the West Indies, former West Indies captain Sammy, guys who are not the most talented in the team, but they seem to have the empathy and the love from both the guy that is very skillful and the guy that you have to drag along. So for me, that empathy is one of the skills or the traits that I would love to have had as a cricketer. In terms of what I've learned over the years is that humility is a very important part of being a cricketer. Because in cricket, and I suppose in other sports, maybe not for Usain Bolt and Michael Phelps, but you fail more than you succeed. And I've had a lot more scores below 40 than I've had above 40. And of course, when you do succeed, the manner in which you do, you create a fan base and you create a successful career. But I believe that being a cricketer and having to pick myself up from the doldrums on many occasions, I think that humility was maybe one of the key things that I've successfully learned about being a sportsman.
Interesting. Jermaine?
Look, as a sports person, it's easy to kind of get carried away with the success and the fame that can come your way. I always felt one of my biggest attributes that I feel helps me now is I was always humble as a sports person. Whether I was in the changing rooms with my players, I was captain at a few clubs that I was involved with, and as Brian says, you have to have the ability to be able to communicate almost with the youngsters and also with the elders, and have that respect of the whole changing room to be able to lead a team. And when you have that responsibility and that feeling of maybe being a captain, it can go to people's heads, and they can mistreat it, I would say. And I always felt that it was me, the ability to be humble in those moments, on the pitch, off the pitch, when I was meeting fans. Now I've retired, I feel that I've kind of got the reward of that by kind of being able to take on a new career and a new path on television, and those people that I was obviously kind to throughout my career are now helping me along what I consider just as serious as a career as I treated as a sportsman. So it was just that ability to be humble.
Okay, lovely. So, and respect, as you say, as well, for everyone that you're...
Of course, yeah. The respect in sport. Respect in sport is a huge thing, which is why, I sit here with these elite athletes in awe at times. My dad, if he saw me sat next to Brian Lara, would go crazy. So, and my granddad, God rest his soul, was biggest West Indies fan. So yeah, I mean, this is a special moment for me even.
Oh. Aravinda?
Yeah, I guess I think continuing on what they mentioned, teamwork is something which is very important, and understanding each other's strength. As a team, we were successful in '96. That was mainly due to the fact that we were able to understand every individual's strength, and we capitalized on those strengths. The two openers whom we, in Australia actually, during one of the games, we suddenly realized Kaluvitarana was batting down the order, Sanath was batting down the order, and these two were two guys whom we had to play in the side. And every time they went out to bat in the middle overs, they would hit a couple of good shots and get caught on the boundary. So we made a decision at a team meeting that the two openers who were failing, we might as well get these two guys to open and get the guys who are opening to bat down the order and give them a go to see how it all goes. So then suddenly we realized that the next particular game, Kalu got a 50, and the following game, Sanath got a 70, and we won 2 games. So that really changed the way we were thinking, and then also to do that change, we had to be brave and go ahead, and I think the team, the senior team who made the decision at the time, said, okay, we take that challenge and we should go ahead and do it. So what I'm trying to say is to identify those strengths and fit them where they should, and then give them a specific role to do, so that they make sure and they're focused to achieve that target, whichever is given to them. That way you try to get the best out of every individual in their own strength. And that is probably one area I've really learned through cricket.
Great, really, that's really interesting. Dwight?
Yeah, for me, I think that in respect to what the other boys have said, I think all those things that they mentioned are very, very important. But for me, as my part was slightly different, coming from the Caribbean, having to make all the adjustments, coming into a new environment, the transition from the Caribbean, as you know, sunny beaches, weather is perfect, and coming to England at a very, not that England is not bad, because I lived there for 30 years.
Not a great move, really.
But the weather, the food, the culture, the people, all of those things as a kid, coming over at the age of 16, 17, I had to make those adjustments, and I found that very difficult. It would have been easy for me to take the easy part and return back to the Caribbean. But something inside of me said to me, as an individual, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to come to England, to do something that you love doing. I know my mom dearly wanted me to pursue education, but I felt that education was something I could always return to, whereas football, I could never return to it. With the age goes by, as all of us sit here now, we're all retired. But the path of coming to England and the professionalism that I had to learn of my sport, the dedications, those kind of stuff was very, very important for me as an individual. Not having my parents at that age to sort of give me the guidance I wanted to. So I had to make these adjustments very quickly. And then, of course, spending 10 years at Aston Villa and learning the development of football and learning the interaction of different culture with different people, that also opened my eyes to something that I was never used to as a person growing up in the Caribbean. But then when I made the transition from Aston Villa for 10 years and then moved on to Manchester United, that was a total different level. In Sir Alex Ferguson as our leader, he's a tough character, I have to say, somebody that was on a total different level. Something that I learned a lot of things from him. Looking back now in my career, the things that he wanted me to do to stay focused, to get the very best out of me as an individual every day, day in, day out, not to take your eye off the ball. As Jermaine says, as a footballer, you get caught up in that bubble. When things are good for you, it seems like your road is very clear. But there are times, there are challenges, there are dark days in between there that you have to find yourself. You have to find people close to you who you can relate to. Sometimes people don't understand what you're going through as an individual. So I find that very difficult. But then also by doing that, I was very successful at Manchester United Football Club. So I find a team and a leader that is used to winning, that sort of encourage you to make sure that you stay focused within that. And so for me, when I look back now, that my Man United years was very, very important. And I have to thank Sir Alex Ferguson in doing so, because he was immense. And now I clearly understand. I can look back now and think, wow, those are the reasons why he wanted you to be this way. You never saw it when you was a player. But for me, that was something that was important. So it's very important that we can share all these together as an individual. But at the same time, it was just a wonderful experience.
Okay. So that adaptability, have you taken that into your life outside sport?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, the adaptability, that is something that is very important. So we talk about, as I said, Brian talked about the 4 categories. For me, I had to adapt. Moving from the Caribbean to England, the people, the food, the culture, interacting with the media, interacting with different people. That was something that was new to me as well. But yeah, the adaptability is something that I will say that was very, very important for me going forward.
Great. So following on from that question, I take it you all believe that teaching sport is maybe more crucial than ever. If you agree with that, what would your advice be to education ministers about the teaching of sport in schools now? And also, how should they encourage young people to take up fitness sport? And please do bear in mind that I think there's 40 education ministers at this conference.
Look, I personally think that there are little steps that are being made in the right direction. I do a lot of work and speaking in schools in London, especially about raising aspiration levels within kids. And I feel I'm talking about London specifically here because it's a part of the world where space is not well, there's not much of it basically. But then you go to the private sector, and there's acres and acres of land where within the private schools we're developing rugby players and cricketers at will because of the facilities that they have at their disposal. I would personally like to see more integration between the state schools and the public sector to enable the less fortunate child who basically has a playground of concrete to play on and a little patch in the corner maybe of 3G grass to go and experience the ability to see acres of land and play on a proper cricket pitch or a proper football pitch with nets and so on. I was very fortunate where I grew up in Nottingham because we had the Home Pierpoint Centre, which is obviously it's the water sports centre of England. Now, there are things I did as a kid which I would never have done, or I was so fortunate to have the opportunity to do, like rowing. for example. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't enjoy rowing, but I was forced to do it, and I might have wanted to become a rower because of the experience and the ability to be able to go onto the River Trent and row. Now, like I said, I think specifically in London, I feel the opportunities for a lot of kids that I come across, they're very narrow. And I think a lot of the time, I mean, albeit it's great that the state schools seem to produce a lot of footballers because it's a matter of chucking down 2 jackets and playing a game of football on any surface. But, you know, to go to that next level and for our state schools to be generating athletes of all different types of sectors, whether it's, you know, snooker, golf's a big one, or tennis. You know, these are all sports where you need money to be able to play in these sports. So if we all of a sudden watching Wimbledon and thinking, why have we only got Andy Murray and we haven't got enough young athletes who want to play tennis coming through, those are the reasons why I feel.
Yep, so we need to give every child an equal opportunity,
Every child
so we're not missing a Jermaine Jenas of the future.
Precisely. You know, I do feel it is happening. It is. I know there are, you know, certain private sectors that do work with state schools, but I think we could do so much more.
Brian?
Yeah, well, I think that there's so much distractions now for all the young people that there should be an even more greater emphasis on sport. I mean, back in my day as a school kid, some 30 years ago, it was very easy to fall into sport. As a West Indian, your dad and your parents, your siblings, everybody knew the West Indies cricket team was the best, one of the best sporting team in the world. So to fall into a sporting environment was very easy. As I said, nowadays you have distractions and technology, so the emphasis have to be even greater because the benefits of sports remain the same, be it for an individual that likes sport or be it for someone who is academically inclined. Just the physical part of sport, the mental side, you know, how you gain mentally as a person that plays sport, even though it's just as a recreation. So I would like to see the leaders in the sporting field look at it as being very beneficial. And it's still the case where the numbers that eventually become international sports people and make a career out of it is very, very small. But the benefit for the entire group of people that engage in sport is so great. And I'm still in awe of a few friends that I've been with at school, and they are bigwigs around the world, just from small Trinidad and Tobago, you know, head of KPN and PMG. Someone is a plastic surgeon in LA. And you sit down and you have a beer with them today. And the one thing they go straight back to is stories about sport. You know, holding up an end while I was scoring 100 at the other end. Or saving a goal, you know, from crossing the line against a college rival. And that seemed to be so important to them. Today they're fit, they still play a little bit of sport. And I feel that that is very, very important to anybody that has an influence on sport in any educational institution.
Aravinda?
Yeah, actually this keeps baffling me all the time because if you look at the world over and you take top government officials, especially the finance ministers, would read out a budget, and the budget escalations will be on defense instead of something like sport, which I think is something which is very, very important to bring communities together and also to develop the human resources which is required to make sure that these kids are looked after and nurtured all the way through. When I look at my principal, who was a visionary, he at 14 years I was able to play at the top level of the school during my time, and the reason being that opportunity was given to me mainly because of the 2 coaches he was able to employ in our school. The 2 coaches I had when I was 14 years or 9 years was the 2 national coaches at the time. So the knowledge I gained as a 9-year-old was something which was required at the highest level. So I guess it's developing the human resource which is so important, and the way to do that is to invest in the human resource which is very, very important.
Okay, Dwight?
For me, education and it's for me, and also the sports unify people. It brings people together from different type of background. Education is something that we know that is very important, but sports for me, certainly from my experience over the years, what I've gained and noticed is that you bring different personnel to the sport. You know, a moment that people can interact and socialize at the same level. No one seems to be any different than others, and I think that's something that I've learned over the years when I look back, and even to this day, as Brian said, you know, you have people in high places but they always revert back to sport. So while I was growing up in the Caribbean, just like Brian, you know, we had, you know, cricket and football. Those were the two sports that was obviously renowned within the Caribbean. And you didn't really have a choice. We didn't have the distraction that is there today. As Brian said, the social media, all the other aspect that can distract you in sport. We will pretty much didn't have the choices that are there for the kids today. So the kids nowadays, they have all the avenues, and it's down to the individual. But we as educational and sporting icons, we have to encourage them to make sure that they got all the right fundamentals if they want to achieve different aspects in whatever sports. Golf is something that, you know, I'm very fond of, but I didn't know about it when I was young because I wasn't, you know, sort of given the opportunity to learn golf. And I think when you look at sports, the lesser kids in less privileged areas must be able to give that opportunity, you know, that equal rights of getting to at least play a sports that they could sort of understand or say, well, at least I've given that opportunity. And I think in the modern day, in the 21st century, those opportunities should certainly be closer to where it was back in the days. And that for me is something that I'm very keen of trying to emulate and try to let the kids understand that the opportunities are far greater now than when it was back in the days. And equally, the kids have to be dedicated, want to learn, get to understand what it takes to be at that level. But at least they should be given that opportunity to make sure that they can play a sport that they're not used to.
Sure. And maybe so important for a child maybe who isn't particularly academically inclined, that sport might be their thing. It might be the thing that defines them and gives them a status and builds their self-esteem and takes them forward into life.
Yeah.
Okay, as the theme of the conference is global citizenship, people often talk about the incredible role that sport has played in uniting people across the world, from the Olympics to the Football World Cup and the Cricket World Cup. Can each of you perhaps give an anecdote from your own sporting histories where you have seen your sport bringing people together? And what more can different sports do to help that become even more of a thing?
Can I start?
Yeah.
Well, to be honest with you, mine's quite a negative one in terms of bringing people together. Might not be the way you want to start it, but we're going to go there anyway. It was at White Hart Lane. We were playing an FA Cup game. I was in the stadium. I wasn't playing within the game at that particular time against Bolton, and Fabrice Mwamba, who everybody may know this story. He had a heart attack on the pitch, and I've never seen a football stadium turn from that rivalry, that territorial kind of us against you, we hate you, you hate us type element to just pure and utter love for a specific moment that was happening to a human being on the pitch. And that was what was happening within the pitch at White Hart Lane. The way that it escalated to something else around all sports and all walks of life was something I've never seen before. And to be just witness to it as an athlete was a surreal moment, I found. Not just in football, in sport. It was a moment that everybody kind of took a step back and went, not that it's just a game, but wow, this is what sport can actually do. Everybody, including fans who sometimes get a very bad reputation for the way that they behave within the stadium, whether it be about racism or the things that they're shouting onto the pitch, it all was just forgotten. Everyone just went, this is a serious moment. And, as I said, that, for me, in my professional career, was one of the biggest moments I've seen sport come together to support one individual.
Yeah. So the common humanity.
The humanity
overcame
element.
Everything else.
Honestly, it was a surreal moment, which sport won hands down on that night.
Absolutely. Who wants to go next?
Uh,
Aravinda?
I think when we won the World Cup in '96, that was a time where the country was going through a war, and we speak to some of those people who were involved in the war during that time. And one thing they mentioned was, and then it really makes me feel so happy, that they used to communicate with the LTT and the government soldiers. And that particular day, they said that they had decided we are not going to fight with each other on this particular day because we all want to watch the match. And this is a true story. And I think something like that, if people can come together and avoid a war such as that, I think it makes sense for someone to really play sport and bring people together. It's a great story.
That reminds me of the Second World War Christmas Day truce, wasn't it, between the two sides? Dwight?
Yeah, it's amazing what sports does, isn't it? And it's fascinating to hear the other guy's story. But mine was, again, pretty much like the boys. In 2006, when Trinidad and Tobago qualified for the World Cup for the first time, we are the smallest nation to have done that. Something that I will always remember. It was a very proud moment in our history. Not only that, but it unified people together. We were going through a crisis of crime in the country. Crime was escalating to a level that we never seen it before. This is how the story been told, because I was playing in Germany at the time, but when we were playing our first game against Sweden, we've been told, or the story has been told, there was no cars in the street. Everyone was everyone is at home. Everyone was enticed in the game, really committed, unified. Your neighbors that you never speak to were speaking to each other. Everyone wanted to watch the game, and it's amazing what sports does in terms of bringing people, different background, different culture, different ethnic backgrounds. It's amazing, and so after the whistle, after we had draw the game against Sweden. The story again been told that the whole country came out in celebration, even though it was a 0-0 draw. It felt like a win for us. That's the enormity of the result for us. And so it just goes to show what the sports really does, and it's something that even to this day, as you said, people in high office, always revert back to sports. We are privileged to have played at the level. We are privileged to be here to share these stories, and hopefully that the message will get through to the young people.
Brian?
Yeah, well, cricket is actually the only unifying force in the West Indies. We do nothing else together but cricket. I think maybe close to a couple hundred years ago, some plantation owners, some English plantation owners, struggling to sell sugar in the Caribbean. And they took themselves to America, and with them, they played a few cricket games. And I understand that that's where the West Indies cricket team was formed. Nothing else, not a West Indies football team. But we come together in cricket because that's history. But Dwight is talking about 2006 when Trinidad and Tobago made the World Cup. I can tell Dwight I was in the Caribbean, and it was not just Trinidad and Tobago in the World Cup, it was the Caribbean in the World Cup. Barbados, Jamaicans, St. Lucians, everybody felt that they were a part of the World Cup because one of the islands was actually being represented. And let me tell you something, I wear that gold medal as much as Usain Bolt wears his Jamaican gold, within that 100 meters. So, and even in athletics, whatever we do as a Caribbean people, I think it brings a lot of joy for all of us, and it unifies us. And small islands. They've tried with the Caribbean community, CARICOM. They were very unsuccessful in that politically. We have not been able to bring any other sporting team together, even though we do love each and every single sportsman and their success around the world. So for us, sport is a major part of the West Indies. It gives us an identity around the world. You go to China and you tell somebody that, you know, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and they want to know what you're talking about, but you tell them, I'm from the country where Dwight Yorke is from, and then they do understand what you're talking about. So it's amazing what sport can do for just us. I mean, 6 million people in the Caribbean, 12 or 13 different English-speaking islands, and it's been a tremendous help for us as a people.
You two are best mates, aren't you?
Just a little bit.
Yes, a little bit. I picked this up. So I guess we should also explore the darker side of sport. Sport can also really divide people, and we've all heard about stories of racist abuse at football games. And some argue that tennis and golf and even cricket, you were kind of alluding to this earlier, exclude those who are not privileged. So what can be done to challenge some of these aspects, and in particular open up the sport to as many young people as possible?
I think that in terms of my experiences, and you talk about the dark side, I'm not sure if I want to really expand on that, but what I felt, and I think is so important to cricket, and I could only speak about Trinidad and Tobago and growing up, is that a lot of my young heroes were actually young white kids. Their parents were the same age as my father and my mother. Their parents played sport in the 50s and 60s, and during that period of time, the West Indies team was the majority of a white team. And their kids now, I spend time in school with them, and if it was David Carew or Michael Carew or Gomez or Rodriguez, they were all sons of former great cricketers. And I rubbed shoulders with those guys in school, and for me, color was never an issue. And I felt that, I remembered we were going to India as a schoolboys team, and I felt that I was far removed from being in the final 16 to be selected. I was just still very young. And before I knew it, I was almost up front because all these kids dropped out. And I believe that it was information from their parents saying that going to India as a 14, 15-year-old, they wouldn't want their sons to do that. And eventually those kids turned to education more than sport, even though they were very much talented. And the West Indies team, I believe, was not truly represented by the best talented or most talented youngsters in the Caribbean. And maybe they felt that they weren't necessarily a part of the team when you look at, you know, the team and what it looked like. And I would like to see that being addressed because it's important that we get the best and most talented youngsters playing, no matter what race or color. Mm-hmm. And we in the West Indies are going to benefit if we do that.
Jermaine, and you spoke about it earlier, so.
Yeah, I did. What's weird about this situation is I actually feel fortunate in the era that I grew up in as an athlete. And there was racism. I went to a lot of places in and around Europe and even in England, you know, where I heard racist chants at times. Now, where I say I feel fortunate is I think back to my dad was a semi-professional footballer. I think about to people like John Barnes and what they came through as footballers, bananas getting thrown at them on the pitch. And how they handled themselves within that era. And I felt a responsibility was on players like my shoulders to act in the same professional manner that somebody like John Barnes did when he was coming through, playing in England, and how he handled it. Things have got better, don't get me wrong. Do I ever see it completely vanishing? I'm not 100% sure, if I'm totally honest. I think what we can do, though, as individuals ourselves, we can lead from the front and show that it's not the right thing to do, but also as teachers within the schools, I think, especially at that grassroots level, because what's very difficult for teachers, I find, is the minute they leave school and they go into their homes, you don't know what's going on, you don't know how they're being raised by their parents, so you know there might be one thing happening at one school, and then obviously going home and their parents might have been brought up a certain way where they are racist. How do we know? I think the positive thing that I'm seeing as I go around a lot of schools within London is the integration. I'm seeing a number of different cultures integrating with each other. Whereas we all maybe went to a school where everybody was black, or everybody was white, or maybe there was only 2 or 3 black guys in the school and you knew exactly who they were. That's just kind of, that was of the era. Whereas now I feel that we are moving forward as well. Within the world, I feel we're moving forward, definitely, especially within England, from what I've seen anyway. But I do feel that, from a teacher's point of view, they have to be very specific in terms of highlighting certain issues if they see things within school and somebody is being isolated for being of a different ethnic background, because that, when you shock a child when they're young with that information that's not right, they can then carry that forward so that in 10, 15, 20 years' time, hopefully somebody else is sat here saying there is no racism in football or in sport anymore. And I think that's what the best teachers can bring to the table.
And as you say, sport really leading the way for the rest of us. Aravinda.
Yes, I guess with one of the countries, I think Australia, there were always racist comments which never bothered me though. But I think the whole country, every time they see something on television, they keep asking the players. And I always used to say, they're very, very nice guys, but it's how they play the game. They play it hard, and some moments occur such as that doesn't really mean that they're really racist. That tend to divide the two countries and create a rivalry. And I think that is something which I have seen as a negative in the sport, because my children are all Aussie passport holders. They're residents of Australia, but for me, it doesn't make any difference. But I think for people who watch on the screen, they think, okay, this is how they live, and they talk about the color and the culture. So I think that is one negative thing which I see coming out of sport. But I think it's very, very important to educate the cricketers, which I think the ICC is trying to do, having match referees and trying to control situations such as that, is the right way to go forward and not create any of those situations on the field.
Sure.
Just to touch on what Jermaine was saying, in our sports we have made immense progress, I think. As I said, I've come to England back in '89 and obviously played at the level for a number of years. I've been privileged to play alongside someone like Silva and even John Barnes, and to hear the stories back in the 70s and 80s, the sort of things that these guys have to endure was horrific. But I have seen progress. You're asking me if it still does exist. I think it does. I think there's a minority within the game. You see in football in particular, it's been categorized in that sort of a way. But I do believe that education is very important. It has to start from the grassroots. I think we got to nip it in the bud in school straight away. For the less privileged kids, skin color was not something that I was aware of when I was growing up. I just know as a young boy growing up that you have to treat every individual equally. Something that we were brought up as young boys and girls back in the Caribbean, to say good morning to your elders. I think that's something that is not exists as much as it used to be. You couldn't pass someone in the street back in my days if they were older than you and not say good morning. You probably get a clip around the ear from your parents back then. But that is something that I would like to see come back into our society, and something that from an educational point of view that we need to integrate back into the students, to that discipline, because discipline is a key word or key word for me going forward. If you don't have that discipline from a very early stage, that interaction from your parents that should guide you, and not just your parents but your teachers should guide you as well. And I think for me that's something that I would like to see that is back into our society. But from a personal point of view, I think the biggest disappointment, even though there is always this minority that racism is something that still does exist. I've once witnessed it from a player back in the days, and I think that was more of a shock to me because of the progress that we have made over the years. To come from a fellow professional that is stating that I was racist, for me that was something that I felt was very offended by the fact that he accused me of racism, which is something that I've never done throughout my career. So that really take me back to hear it come from a fellow professional. But as I said, despite that, we have made enormous progress, and it's something that sports continue to try and achieve over the years.
We're up against time a bit, so maybe we'll just have two of you answer each of the remaining questions. So Brian and Jermaine, let's talk about the role sports people have as role models for young people. Do you think modern sports stars are aware of their power to influence young people's behaviour, and do they care about it?
I think, of course we are. I mean, sport is still the most popular discipline that's going around. And, as you talk about it, unifies people around the world. And people now with social media, they have easy access to any of the sporting heroes. So I believe that we do play a very important part, and I do believe that a lot of sportsmen do understand their responsibilities and take it very seriously. I mean, mentoring is something that I do not just in the Caribbean. I just came from Hong Kong, mentoring a group of youngsters there, and I think it's important to show these young kids that you are a human being as well. You spend time with them and they can see you and they can feel you and they can understand you. And you can share some of your successes, but you can also share some of the hard times that you've been through. So for me, I think it's very important. Being a role model, it's very important to communicate with the youngsters around the world. It's very important to show them, lead by example. And it's something that I would continue doing, and it's something that I know a lot of sportsmen do.
Jermaine?
The thing about being a role model, especially when you're young, is you almost don't know you're a role model because you're living this life as a youngster with all this success without realizing how much people are looking up to you. I think in today's world, as Brian says, with the social media element, there are players that I know that are very aware that they are role models, but you see everything now. You see everything that everybody is doing at every second of the day. Whereas,
done it themselves.
precisely, and as obviously as the media, we're very quick to shoot people down, and we all made mistakes throughout our careers. We all did. It's a process of learning. Now, I think the divide in football, especially, is what is creating a problem. The divide between fan and actual player, that financial element to what footballers are earning now, it's always been there, but there used to be a more of a relationship between the fan and the player. And I think somehow the more we can get that back together again, that will help a lot more as well. And I think the more we kind of educate footballers, sports people in terms of how they use their social media as well going forward will help them realize that so many people look upon them.
Okay. So Dwight and Aravinda, what can be done to help sports stars deal with the enormous pressures that being an elite athlete now entails? Television, money, sponsorship, the things you're talking about, 24-hour news, media and online news. And do you feel that you are prepared for the limelight? Do you think that sports stars need more education in terms of how they deal with the money and the fame?
I think that's a very, very important area. In schools, I think what needs to be taught is values. I think once you're taught that, and that's where it all starts. And as a youngster, as he said, you don't realize until such time, maybe at a later age, that you're a role model. But people keep following you, your success. And at the same time, what we have learned all these years, if I knew that when I was a kid, well, today I would have been one of the greatest players like Brian. But we had a learning curve. We make mistakes, and we are all human. So when we when we started, we work out ways to come out of difficult situations, failures, and in our country, unfortunately, we didn't have, at the time when we started, we didn't have the best of the coaches or past cricketers to help us. Of course, there were, but not at the level we required at that time. So we had to learn through trial and error. So we went through that process. So now it's time for us to give something back, and that is where I feel that we should go back and teach them exactly what these values are. And by doing that, you teach them how to handle fame, how to handle money, which I think is very, very important, because we had some players in the in the national team who actually, during my time, who didn't know how to go and open a bank account. So for people who got money into their hands without knowing how to use it, where to park it, was a problem. So I guess that's a kind of education which is very, very important. That is what life skills are all about. And that is what you can learn through the sport at that young age.
Dwight.
Yeah, for me, coming from the Caribbean, of course, and playing for Man United and going on to win all these trophies and facing the cameras is not something that I set out to be. You know, I didn't know that was going to happen to me. So I didn't have any sort of experience. I had to adjust to those situations, something that, you know, I personally had to take time in terms of how I speak to the media, how I speak to people, how I, you know, sort of carry yourself. And the one thing that comes out of this conversation here, we all made mistakes. You know, when we look back now, could we have done things differently? Of course we could. And we understand the roles of sports personality, people, you know, that other people look up to, especially younger kids, that we have to carry ourselves in a certain way. We understand the responsibilities that comes with being an icon of scoring a goal, or being, you know, scoring 100 in Brian's case. That's part and parcel of being a sportsman. But equally, as well as being a role model, I think the role model has to come from within the parents as well. You know, I think the guidance has to also equally come from the parents. We as sportsmen, we can only be role model to a certain level. You know, yes, they may see us as sports because they like the way how we play football or how we play cricket. But at the same time, you know, these kids have to take the responsibility as well going forward. For me, the thing that of being a role model is knowing that with the social media now in the modern day game, that you have to take, you know, additional responsibility, that you are aware of what is happening around you, especially if you're in the public eye. You just have to just be careful, as simple as that, because you step out of line, the media are there to make something of it. But we're all human beings. We all have made mistakes along the way. And I think that is very important that people understand that as well. But equally, you know, role model is something is very much part of the sport and every sport. And as players, we all have to take responsibility. It's something that we have learned over the years, and we would love to give back to the young kids to try and guide them in the right direction, that they needed to be guided. The mistakes that we have made, that we can, you know, share those experiences with these kids to make sure that they don't make the mistakes that we have. But that's part of being the role model that we are today.
Okay, great. We literally have less than a minute left. Has anyone got a burning question? Most influential teacher in school. Very quickly.
Yeah.
10 seconds
Oh,
each.
you want his name? No, actually, it was my my English and Spanish teacher who actually doubled up as the sports master, Harry Ramdas. And, you know, those formative years at Fatima College and spending time with him and also rubbing shoulders with other young sportsmen was a key moment in my life. And I do give him all the praises whenever necessary. He was not a, say, you know, knowledgeable or former cricketer or anything like that, but the discipline that he imparted on me was something that I carried throughout my career.
I mean, weirdly enough, I mean, I've got a feeling that a lot of us will associate our best teacher with sport as well. I mean, his name was Mr. Jennings, and he was the same. He taught English in the day, but he was also my football coach. And I think it was that relationship that you develop, you know, from a sporting element, that respect that we developed, that when I went into the classroom, I immediately, it was like, I wasn't bad anyway, but he probably got more out of me in terms of behavior, because I looked at him, I was like, well, you're my football manager. I want to play this weekend or this week, so I'm going to make sure I listen in this lesson. So Mr. Jennings, he was the one that probably taught me a lot as a young man.
My principal, I think he taught us proper values and also to respect elders and teachers, I think, which was very, very important. And more so, he was like a father to me and to the entire school. I think that was very, very important.
Bertie Sinclair, for me, he was obviously a football coach. He was obviously a PE teacher as well. But you know, he was a disciplinary. He wanted you there on time. He would give you extra press-up and push-ups and stuff. So he taught me at a very young age the disciplinary that you need to take if you were to succeed. So I'm very grateful to Bertie Sinclair in giving me that sort of guidance at a very young age.
Okay, I think we're done. Yes, on time? Yep. Well, guys, thank you so much. I think we've all learned an awful lot from you. I think for me, chiefly that sport goes way beyond the sport itself in what it brings to you, teamwork, humility, all the things you talked about, and how important it is that today's education ministers concentrate on sport and make sure that children get as much from it as you all obviously have done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.